The blue-green waters of planet Aquaros shimmered under twin suns, but today they reflected only terror. High Chancellor Meltara floated in the emergency council chamber, her translucent fins trembling as she watched the holographic display showing their outer colonies. One by one, the lights representing their peaceful worlds were going dark. Another system has fallen, reported Sub-Chancellor Vextar, his voice barely above a whisper. The Titan colony. 2 billion souls, gone in less than 6 hours. The council members of the Aquarian Alliance sat in stunned silence. 12 different species, all evolved from ocean worlds, all committed to peace and harmony. For 3,000 years, they had built a civilization based on cooperation, art, and scientific discovery. They had never needed weapons beyond simple mining tools. Now they faced extinction. The Devourer horde had appeared from the dark space between galaxies 3 months ago. Nobody knew where they came from or what they wanted. They simply consumed everything in their path. Planets, moons, space stations, even asteroids, nothing escaped their hunger. The creatures seemed to be part machine and part living tissue, working together like cells in a massive organism. Our defense shields? Meltara asked, though she already knew the answer. Useless, replied Admiral Kethnor of the Alliance fleet. Their bioships just absorb the energy and grow stronger. Our construction lasers barely scratch their hulls. We lost another 100 ships trying to defend the mining station Beta. Meltara closed her large, dark eyes. The Alliance had always believed that advanced technology and wisdom could solve any problem. They had energy barriers that could stop asteroids, medical technology that could heal any wound, and starships that could cross the galaxy in days. But none of it mattered against an enemy that simply ate everything it touched. What about the other galactic powers? Asked Council Member Yelvira. Surely someone will help us. Sub-Chancellor Vextar activated another display. The responses to their desperate messages filled the air above them. The Crystalline Empire had sent a cold refusal, stating that the Alliance's fate was not their concern. The Metal Lords had simply ignored their pleas. The energy beings had responded with mathematical equations that basically said helping would be unprofitable. Everyone is afraid, Vextar explained. The Devourer horde destroyed the Iron Fleet in 4 hours. The Iron Fleet. Those ships were the size of moons, and the creatures just ate them. Meltara felt her heart sinking. The Alliance had always been kind to other species, sharing their medical knowledge and peaceful technologies freely. They had never asked for anything in return except friendship. Now, when they needed help the most, they were alone. There must be someone, she said desperately. Send the distress signal to every corner of the galaxy. Offer them anything, our scientific knowledge, our art, our planets. Just please, someone must be willing to help. The communication officers worked frantically, broadcasting their plea across thousands of star systems. The message was simple: peaceful species facing extinction. Requesting immediate military assistance. We'll share all technology and resources in return for survival. Hours passed. Then days. The responses were always the same: silence, refusal, or demands for payment the Alliance could never afford. Meanwhile, the Horde kept advancing. Each day brought news of more destroyed colonies, more billions of lives consumed by the hungry creatures. The Alliance's own fleet, designed for exploration and construction, was completely helpless. Their biggest ships were research vessels and hospital ships. They had never built anything meant to kill. Perhaps we should surrender, suggested Council Member Morden quietly. Maybe if we don't fight them, they'll let some of us live. You saw what happened to the peaceful coalition, Admiral Kethnor replied grimly. The creatures consumed them whether they fought or not. These things don't take prisoners. They just eat. On the 7th day, as reports came in of the Horde approaching their core worlds, something unexpected happened. A new signal appeared on their communication arrays. It was coming from a small spiral arm of the galaxy that most civilizations ignored. The message was short and simple: distress call received. Admiral James Mitchell commanding Terran Defense Fleet. 12,000 ships preparing for immediate departure. Transmit coordinates of enemy position. Help is coming. The council chamber fell completely silent. Vextar checked the signal twice, then 3 times. Terran? He said slowly. That's the humans, isn't it? The species from that little yellow star? Meltara remembered humans vaguely from diplomatic records. A young species that had just discovered faster-than-light travel a few hundred years ago. They lived on a small blue world and had barely expanded beyond their local star cluster. Most galactic civilizations barely acknowledged their existence. 12,000 ships, she said in disbelief. But they're primitives. Their entire military couldn't possibly have more than a few hundred vessels. The message seems genuine, reported the communication officer. It's coming from multiple sources across their space. They're requesting detailed information about enemy strength and positions. Council member Yelvira shook her head. This must be a mistake. How could such a young species mobilize 12,000 warships? It's impossible. But Meltara felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Maybe it was impossible. Maybe these humans were lying or confused about their numbers. But they were the only ones who had answered the call. Send them everything, she ordered. Tactical data, enemy positions, our defense plans. If they're really coming to help, give them every advantage we can. As the data transmitted across space toward the distant human worlds, Meltara prayed to the ancient ocean spirits. Whether 12 ships or 12,000, at least someone in the galaxy still believed that peaceful species deserved protection. The waiting was torture. 3 days had passed since the humans promised help, and the Devourer horde was now only 2 star systems away from Aquaros itself. Chancellor Meltara floated in the command center, watching her people prepare for the end. Families were saying goodbye. Children who had never seen war were being moved to the deepest ocean shelters. Long-range sensors are detecting something, announced Sensor Operator Welkin, his voice shaking with exhaustion. Multiple hyperspace signatures approaching the rendezvous point. Meltara's hearts began beating faster. The rendezvous point was an empty region of space between 2 dead stars, chosen because it was far from any Devourer activity. If the humans were really coming, this is where they would appear. How many ships? She asked, trying to keep hope from her voice. Welkin stared at his instruments in confusion. I'm not sure, Chancellor. The readings are strange. It looks like hundreds of signatures, but they're all jumbled together. Sub-Chancellor Vextar swam closer to the display. Maybe their hyperspace technology is primitive. They probably travel in small groups and arrived scattered across the area. The main viewing screen activated, showing the dark space around the rendezvous point. For a moment, nothing happened. Then reality seemed to tear open. The first human ship emerged from hyperspace like a silver knife cutting through black cloth. It was bigger than any Alliance vessel, covered in strange angular armor and bristling with weapon systems that looked deadly even when powered down. Before anyone could react, another ship appeared beside it. Then another. By the deep currents, whispered Admiral Kethnor. They're not stopping. Ships kept materializing out of hyperspace. Sleek destroyers that moved like hunting sharks. Massive cruisers covered in gun turrets. Enormous battleships that dwarfed even the Alliance's largest research vessels. Each one looked like it had been built for only one purpose: war. Count them, Meltara ordered, her voice barely working. Welkin's fins trembled as he worked his instruments. 100, 500, 1,000. His voice grew weaker with each number. 2,000, 5,000. The Alliance Council watched in stunned silence as the human fleet continued to grow. These weren't the primitive ships they had expected. Each vessel looked advanced, powerful, and most importantly, experienced. Battle scars marked their hulls. Weapon burns showed they had fought before and survived. 8,000, 10,000. Welkin's voice was now just a whisper. 11,000, 12,000. Finally, the flow of ships stopped. 12,000 human warships floated in perfect formation, their engines glowing with contained power. The smallest destroyer was larger than the Alliance's biggest warship. The largest dreadnoughts were like floating cities, armed with weapons the aquatic species couldn't even identify. This is impossible, breathed Council Member Yelvira. How does such a young species have this many warships? The communication system crackled to life. A human face appeared on the screen, weathered, scarred, with gray hair and hard eyes that had seen too much fighting. Behind him, other humans worked at stations covered with tactical displays and weapon controls. This is Admiral James Mitchell of the Terran Defense Fleet, the human said in a calm, steady voice. We received your distress call, Chancellor Meltara. We're here to help. Meltara struggled to find words. The human's face was kind but deadly serious. Behind him, she could see other humans moving with military precision. A woman with short brown hair was coordinating fleet movements. A tall man was analyzing enemy data. Everyone moved like they had done this many times before. Admiral Mitchell, Meltara finally managed to say, We are grateful beyond words. But how is this possible? Your species has only recently discovered interstellar travel. How do you have so many warships? The Admiral's expression grew grim. Chancellor, where we come from, everything tries to kill you. Our planet has predators, diseases, natural disasters, and hostile environments. We learned early that the universe is dangerous. When we reached space, we found it was even worse. Captain Emma Watson, the woman behind him, looked up from her displays. Every human colony contributes ships to the defense fleet. Every settlement, every mining station, every research outpost. When peaceful species are threatened, we all respond. But 12,000 ships. Sub-Chancellor Vextar said weakly. The resources, the crews, the logistics. Commander Robert Thompson, a massive human with arms covered in battle scars, stepped forward. Sir, we've been monitoring the enemy signals. These devourer creatures killed 2 billion beings on Titan colony. In our culture, that makes them a target for complete destruction. Admiral Mitchell nodded. Chancellor, humanity has a simple rule. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We fought pirates, hostile aliens, rogue AI systems, and things from dark space that your people can't imagine. The Devourer Horde is just another enemy that needs to be stopped. Meltara felt tears forming in her large eyes. But Admiral, you don't even know us. Why would you risk so much for strangers? The human's weathered face softened slightly. Because that's what decent beings do. When someone calls for help, you answer. When evil threatens the innocent, you fight it. That's not complicated philosophy, Chancellor. That's just being human. Captain Watson reported from her station. Sir, all fleet elements are ready. Weapons charged, shields up, fighters launched. We have reconnaissance drones tracking the enemy's approach vector. Admiral Mitchell turned back to the screen. Chancellor, we'll need detailed information about your defensive positions and civilian evacuation plans. We're going to stop these creatures, but we need your people safe first. As data flowed between the fleets, Meltara realized something that filled her with both hope and terror. The humans hadn't just sent ships, they had sent their entire military culture. These beings had turned warfare into an art form, and they were about to paint the void with devourer blood. The combined human and Alliance fleets moved through hyperspace toward the approaching devourer horde. Chancellor Meltara watched from the Alliance command ship as the humans organized their massive fleet with frightening efficiency. What amazed her most was how they moved without constant communication. Admiral Mitchell, she asked over the communication link, how do your captains know what to do? I see very few messages being sent between your ships. The weathered human smiled grimly. Chancellor, when you fought together for years, you learned to think like a pack. Captain Williams knows what Captain Johnson is planning just by watching her ship's movement. Commander Harris can predict what Major Clark will do in any situation. On her tactical display, Meltara watched the human ships spread out in patterns that seemed random but felt purposeful. 12 destroyers led by Captain David Miller suddenly accelerated toward a distant asteroid field. Behind them, Captain Jennifer Brown's cruiser squadron moved to cover their retreat route. Neither group had received orders, but they moved together like dancers who had practiced the same routine for decades. It's like watching a school of fish, whispered Sub-Chancellor Vextar. But these fish have teeth. The first contact with enemy scouts came 18 hours later. 300 Devourer bioships emerged from hyperspace ahead of the main fleet, their organic hulls pulsing with hungry life. These creatures were the size of battleships, covered in feeding tentacles and weapon growths that could tear through metal like paper. Enemy scouts detected, reported Lieutenant Colonel Mary Johnson from her destroyer squadron. Engaging now. What followed defied every military principle the Alliance knew. Instead of forming defensive lines or calling for reinforcements, the human ships charged directly at the enemy like wild animals attacking prey. Captain Miller's destroyers dove straight into the center of the Devourer formation, their guns blazing with energy weapons that turned the void white-hot. At the same time, Captain Brown's cruisers attacked from above, using the gravity of a nearby gas giant to slingshot themselves at impossible angles. They're going to be surrounded, Admiral Kethnor said in horror. The enemy will destroy them. But the humans had planned for exactly that. As the Devourer scouts moved to surround Miller's destroyers, Commander William Harris burst out of the asteroid field with his squadron, hitting the creatures from behind. The bioships found themselves trapped between 3 human attack groups, each one firing with deadly precision. Target the feeding organs first, Captain Watson's voice crackled over the battle communication. Those things can't regenerate if they can't eat. The human weapons were unlike anything the Alliance had ever seen. Energy beams that could cut through organic armor, explosive missiles that burrowed into enemy hulls before detonating, and kinetic rounds that hit with the force of small asteroids. But more than their technology, it was their tactics that amazed Meltara. The humans fought like their planet's ancient wolves, pack hunters who worked together with deadly instinct. When one ship was damaged, two others immediately moved to protect it. When an enemy showed weakness, every nearby human vessel focused fire on that spot. They seemed to anticipate each other's moves and the enemy's reactions with supernatural accuracy. Captain Thomas Anderson's cruiser took heavy damage from a devourer's feeding tentacles, his shields failing and hull cracking. Instead of retreating, he accelerated directly toward the creature, ramming his ship into its central body. The explosion destroyed both vessels, but it also created an opening that Captain Lisa Parker's squadron exploited, wiping out 5 more bioships in seconds. Anderson. Admiral Mitchell's voice carried real pain. Damn it, Tom. Sir, Commander Thompson reported quietly, his crew evacuated to the escape pods before impact. Rescue ships are already moving to collect them. Within 20 minutes, all 300 Devourer scouts were dead, floating in pieces across the battle zone. Not a single human ship had been completely destroyed, though several were badly damaged. Impossible, breathed Council Member Yelvira. How did they do that? Major John Clark's voice came over the communication system from his marine assault ship. Where we come from, you learn to hunt or you become food. These creatures are just bigger predators than we're used to. Admiral Mitchell studied the tactical display with cold satisfaction. All ships, well done. Damage reports. The reports came in quickly. 17 human vessels needed repairs, but all were still combat capable. The speed and efficiency of their victory had shocked even their own admiral. Chancellor, Admiral Mitchell said, turning to face her on the communication screen, this was just the scouts. The main Devourer force will be much larger and more dangerous. But I want you to understand something, this is what humans do. We've been apex predators on our world for millions of years. Space just gave us a bigger hunting ground. Captain Watson looked up from her analysis of the destroyed bioships. Sir, we're getting some interesting data from the wreckage. These creatures use a form of collective intelligence. Each scout was sharing information with the main hive. They know we're here now. Good, Mitchell replied with a smile that made Meltara's blood run cold. Let them come. The bigger the hunt, the better the victory. As the human fleet regrouped and moved deeper into Alliance space, Meltara began to understand what they had called upon. These humans weren't just warriors, they were predators who had turned killing into an art form. They fought with a combination of technology, tactics, and pure savage instinct that made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The Devourer horde had consumed countless civilizations. But they had never faced anything like humanity before. The sensors on the Alliance command ship screamed warnings as something massive emerged from hyperspace. Chancellor Meltara watched her displays with growing horror as the main Devourer horde materialized in the outer edge of her star system. The enemy force was beyond imagination. Millions of bioships stretched across space like a living plague, each one pulsing with hungry organic life. The smallest creatures were the size of human destroyers. The largest were like living moons, covered in feeding tentacles and weapon growths that could crack planets. By the deep currents, whispered Sub-Chancellor Vextar, his voice filled with despair. There are billions of them. The biomass was so vast it actually blocked out distant stars. The creatures moved together like cells in a massive organism, their collective intelligence coordinating every movement. At the center of the swarm floated something truly terrifying, a command organism the size of a small moon, covered in sensory organs and surrounded by the largest warrior breeds. Admiral Mitchell, Meltara called desperately over the communication link, surely even your fleet cannot face this many enemies. The human admiral studied the tactical displays with the calm expression of a man who had seen impossible odds before. Behind him, Captain Watson coordinated fleet movements while Commander Thompson analyzed enemy formations. None of them looked afraid. Chancellor, Mitchell said quietly, I've seen worse. Not bigger, but worse. These creatures think in straight lines. They rely on numbers and hunger. That makes them predictable. Captain David Miller's voice crackled over the battle network from his destroyer squadron. Sir, enemy advanced scouts are moving to surround us. Classic swarm tactics. Let them come, Admiral Mitchell replied. All ships, execute Protocol Omega. Meltara had no idea what Protocol Omega meant, but she watched in amazement as the human fleet transformed. Ships that had been moving in organized formations suddenly scattered in what looked like complete chaos. Destroyers accelerated toward the enemy at maximum speed. Cruisers dove toward the system's gas giant. Massive dreadnoughts moved to positions that seemed to make no tactical sense. What are they doing? Admiral Kethnor asked in confusion. They're breaking formation. The Devourer advance force struck the scattered human ships like a tidal wave of living death. Thousands of bioships swarmed around isolated human vessels, their feeding tentacles reaching out to consume metal and flesh alike. It looked like the humans were being overwhelmed. Then the trap sprung. Captain Thomas Anderson's damaged cruiser, which had been limping toward the gas giant, suddenly accelerated directly into the largest group of enemy creatures. His ship's reactor was already critical from earlier battle damage. When it detonated, the explosion took out hundreds of bioships and created a gap in the enemy formation. Anderson's away, his voice called over the communication system from an escape pod. Nice fireworks. Immediately, Captain Jennifer Brown's squadron dove through the gap Anderson had created, their weapons tearing into the confused Devourer formation from behind. At the same time, Commander William Harris's destroyers, which had seemed to be retreating, swung around the system's asteroid belt and struck the enemy's flank. They planned this, Meltara realized with awe. They let themselves get surrounded on purpose. The human tactics were unlike anything she had ever seen. Instead of trying to avoid destruction, they used their own damaged ships as weapons. Captain Lisa Parker, whose cruiser had lost its main engines, used her vessel's remaining power to ram directly into a cluster of enemy command organisms. Major John Clark's marine assault ship, overwhelmed by feeding tentacles, detonated its ammunition storage, taking dozens of bioships with it. "Sir," Commander Thompson reported calmly as explosions lit up the void around them, "we're losing ships faster than projected. But enemy casualties are running at 12-1 in our favor." Admiral Mitchell watched his fleet tear itself apart to destroy the enemy and felt pride mixed with grief. Each ship that died took hundreds of Devourer creatures with it. Each crew that sacrificed themselves bought time for their comrades to strike back harder. "All damaged vessels, prepare for final attack runs," he ordered. "Make every shot count." What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. Human ships with failing life support rammed enemy formations. Vessels with critical reactor damage flew directly into Devourer command clusters and detonated. Marines whose ships were being consumed by feeding tentacles fought hand-to-hand against nightmare creatures in the corridors of their own vessels. Captain Emma Watson's battlecruiser, surrounded by dozens of bioships, used its dying moments to transmit targeting data to the rest of the fleet. Enemy command structure identified, her voice came through the static as her ship was torn apart. "Concentrate fire on the central organism." The remaining human dreadnoughts, led by Admiral Mitchell himself, charged directly toward the massive command creature at the center of the horde. Their guns blazed with every weapon they had, pouring destruction into the living moon that controlled the entire swarm. The Devourer command organism, wounded and confused by the humans' suicidal tactics, began to lose control of its subordinate creatures. Bioships started attacking each other. The perfect coordination that made the horde so dangerous began to break down. "They're panicking," reported Lieutenant Colonel Mary Johnson from her battered destroyer. "The collective intelligence is fragmenting." As the human fleet continued its devastating assault, something unprecedented happened. The Devourer horde, which had consumed entire civilizations without ever retreating, began to break apart. Confused and leaderless, the bioships started fleeing in random directions. Chancellor Meltara watched in stunned silence as the humans achieved the impossible. They had turned certain defeat into victory through sheer determination and willingness to sacrifice everything for strangers. The tide had turned, but the price was written in the twisted remains of human ships floating throughout the star system. The silence after battle was deafening. Where once millions of Devourer bioships had swarmed through space like a living plague, now only debris floated among the stars. The massive command organism that had controlled the horde lay dead, its moon-sized corpse slowly breaking apart in the gravity well of Aquaros. Chancellor Meltara floated in her command center, staring at the tactical displays that showed the aftermath of the impossible victory. The Devourer horde was completely destroyed, scattered, broken, their hive mind shattered forever. Not a single bioship remained alive in the entire star system. But the price of victory was written across the void in twisted metal and empty space. Of the 12,000 human warships that had arrived just days ago, only 3,000 remained operational. The rest were gone, some destroyed completely, others so badly damaged they could never fight again. Pieces of human vessels drifted past her viewing screen, each fragment representing crews who had died for people they had never met. "The casualty reports are coming in," Sub-Chancellor Vextar said quietly. His voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before the battle. Admiral Mitchell is requesting permission to recover his people from the wreckage. Meltara nodded, unable to speak. Across the battlefield, human rescue ships moved slowly through the debris fields, searching for survivors. Emergency beacons blinked from escape pods and damaged ships, each one representing lives that had been willing to die for the Alliance. The communication system activated, and Admiral James Mitchell's face appeared on the screen. The human leader looked older than he had just hours ago. His uniform was torn and blooded, and a medical bandage covered half his forehead. Behind him, what remained of his bridge crew worked at stations damaged by the battle. "Chancellor Meltara," he said, his voice hoarse from shouting orders during the fight. "The Devourer threat has been eliminated. Your people are safe." Captain Emma Watson, her left arm in a medical sling, looked up from a damaged console. "Sir, final casualty count is complete. 9,000 ships lost or too damaged to repair. Crew losses." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. 400,000 dead, 200,000 wounded. The numbers hit Meltara like a physical blow. 600,000 human beings had paid the price for her people's survival. Families destroyed, children orphaned, entire communities wiped out, all for strangers from across the galaxy. "Admiral," she began, tears streaming down her face, "what you have done, there are no words. Your people sacrificed everything for us. How can we ever repay such a debt?" Mitchell's weathered face showed exhaustion and grief, but also something else, a quiet satisfaction that came from duty fulfilled. "Chancellor, we didn't come here for payment. We came because it was right." Commander Robert Thompson, his massive frame bearing fresh battle scars, stepped into view. Where we come from, protecting peaceful folks isn't a job, it's what decent beings do. Your people never hurt anyone. That made them worth dying for." Major John Clark's voice came through the communication system from his medical bay, where he was recovering from injuries sustained during the boarding actions. "Chancellor, we've seen what happens when good people have no one to defend them. The universe becomes a darker place." As the human survivors prepared to depart, delegations from across the galaxy began arriving in the Aquaros system. The news of humanity's victory had spread like wildfire through interstellar communication networks. Species that had ignored the Alliance's pleas for help now came offering trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. The Crystalline Empire sent ambassadors with offers of advanced technology. The Metal Lords transmitted economic treaties. The energy beings even provided mathematical proofs of the Alliance's new strategic value. Everyone wanted to be friends with the species that had earned human protection. But Admiral Mitchell showed no interest in the political visitors. His attention remained focused on recovering his people and preparing his damaged fleet for the long journey home. "Admiral," Meltara said during their final communication, "all these other species are offering us alliances now. They want to be our friends because you made us important. But what about you? What do humans ask in return for saving our entire civilization?" The human admiral was quiet for a long moment, looking out at his battered fleet. Ships that had been magnificent war machines were now held together with emergency repairs and determination. Crews that had been 12,000 strong were now barely 3,000 survivors. "Chancellor," he said finally, "we have only one request. When the next distress call comes, and it will come, remember what we did here. Remember that peaceful species deserve protection, no matter who they are or where they come from. Remember that the strong have a duty to defend the weak." Captain Watson, despite her injuries, managed a small smile. "And maybe, if you're feeling grateful, you could answer that distress call yourself. The galaxy needs more people willing to fight for what's right." The human fleet began its departure as suddenly as it had arrived. One by one, the surviving ships activated their hyperspace drives and disappeared into the void. Admiral Mitchell's flagship was the last to leave, its hull scarred but its engines burning bright as it jumped away. As silence returned to the Aquaros system, Meltara realized that everything had changed. The Alliance was no longer just a peaceful confederation of ocean worlds. They had become something more, guardians of the memory of human sacrifice, keepers of the knowledge that some beings in the galaxy would die for strangers. Other civilizations had heard the recordings of the battle. They had seen what happened when peaceful species called for help and humans answered. The message was clear across the galaxy: be kind to those who cannot defend themselves, because somewhere out there, humanity was watching. And you never, ever wanted to be their enemy.